Guys, welcome back to the channel, to Coffee and Cartridges. Today we're going to talk about the 7mm-08 and the .308 Winchester. How do these two match up and which one do I think is better? So stay tuned. Alright, so these are really two very good all-around rifle cartridges. You can't go wrong with either one. And it's actually a really tough call to pick a winner. Most of you probably know this, but just in case you don't, both cartridges have the same case. One is just neck down to 7mm. So they're very similar cases with just different caliber bullets. And so let's just start out by looking at the case itself, the .308 case. Let's talk about the .308 case itself. Here you have the .243, the 7mm-08, and the .308. And along with a few others, these are the cartridges based on that .308 case. Here they are next to a 30-06 case. Basically, the 30-06 case is just a little bit longer. Here they are next to the .270 short mag on the left and the 6.5 on the right. These cases are a little bit wider, as you can see here. The 6.5 is a rebated rim, so the rim's the same, but you can tell the body is thicker. And of course the .270 short mag is bigger all around. The rim and the case is much bigger. And just for reference, you've got a .22 long rifle and the 50 BMG. Here's the two next to a 30-30 and a 7mm PRC. Overall, the .308 case is just a very middle-of-the-road, kind of medium-sized cartridge. I was going to show some comparisons from between 708 and .308, and I looked up some of the numbers in this Lyman book. This is the 51st edition. This is a really good book. I've used it a lot, and I like it quite a bit. But I'm going to be honest with you, their numbers on the 7mm-08 are laughably low. Like, not even in the realm that I've got. I've got so much better with bullet weights between 120 and 160 than what they got. They really need to revisit their test and use some different powders because I just don't understand at all. .308 was a little bit better, but pretty low. And then I looked up the same two cartridges in this manual. Now, Hornady has the 708 really close to what I've got. And so whether it's 120, 140, 160 grain bullets, Hornady's manual, the 11th edition, has some pretty good numbers on the 708. However, their .308 numbers are way, way low. I've gotten much, much better on their .308 loadings. So I'm not really going to go into these books today like I planned. It's just kind of all over the place. You can see here that although they're not literally identical, they're for all intents and purposes the same. Okay, just small variances, which usually happens when people are creating new rounds and they don't want you to accidentally, put a 7mm in a .308. They might change the shoulder or change the neck or something just slightly so that it doesn't fit real well and doesn't chamber in a different cartridge. But basically they're the same thing. One 7mm, one is the 30 caliber. It really is interesting when you look at the different reloading manuals and you see how different that they are. And when it comes to these two cartridges, 7mm-08 and .308, it really depends on the powder. There's some powders out there that are just ideal for certain weight bullets in these cartridges. And if you're not using those powders, it just seems like you just don't get a ton of performance. And so it's very interesting to look at the different reloading manuals. So I'm going to talk mainly from experience. I will say, in all the time that I have made videos on my YouTube channel, if there was two cartridges that performed better than I expected based on the published data I looked at, it's these two cartridges. You can really get a lot out of them, and I'm not talking about being over pressure. They punch way above their weight class. They're very efficient, and if you find the right powder, you can really get a lot out of them. So let's start from the perspective of a reloader, and then we'll go to factory ammo. Both the 7mm and the 30 caliber are very versatile calibers. And what I mean by that is bullet manufacturers offer a wide variety of bullets, in very light to very heavy per caliber bullet weights. If a caliber is really popular and there's a lot of cartridges in that caliber, bullet manufacturers tend to, get a wide variety of bullets out there because it's popular and they think they're going to sell them. Some cartridges, like 25 caliber or even 270 caliber, there's just not as many options out there. One, because of popularity or number of cartridges in that caliber, and then two, because of twist rates and things like that. Now, in the last few years, that is starting to change. We're actually seeing a lot of calibers like the 270 caliber cartridges to get a wider array of bullet weights, mainly because of our newer cartridges like 27 Nosler and 6.8 Western, things like that. But typically speaking, the 7mm and the 30 caliber have been very versatile with a wide array of bullet weights for a long time. If I had to pick one though that would edge out the other one, I would say 30 caliber is the most versatile. Typically you're going to have about a 110 grain bullet up to 250 grain bullet. And with 7mm you're going to have about a 100 grain bullet up to about 195. In almost all cases in the 308, it's not really practical to go beyond 200 grains. And beyond 220 it probably won't even stabilize. And the 7mm generally, has a 9.5 inch twist rate. There are some exceptions to that, but 9.5 inch twist rate is the standard. And usually, 175, 180 is your upper limit. So it's actually really close, but I would say there's a slight advantage to the 30 caliber on just versatility of component bullet weights for reloading. Now when it comes to factory ammo, it still goes to the 30 caliber, and actually more so. So almost all factory ammo in 7mm-08 is going to be 120 grain to 160 grain. Though most 308 factory ammo is between 150 to 180, you still see quite a bit of all the way down to 110. And so factory ammo comes out between 110 and 180 grains in 308, and it's more like 120 to 160 in 708. So once again, 308 would get the nod there as far as versatility of factory ammo. And so just generally speaking, the versatility check would go to 308. What about availability? Well, this is an easy one. It's hands down the 308. The 708 is decently popular, but it's not even in the same league as 308 when it comes to number of rifles chambered for the cartridge, factory ammo offerings, and reloading components. It's just not even close. The 308 is more popular, it's more common, and it's more available. What about performance? Because this is really, the biggest thing, performance. It's actually not an easy thing to judge. It really depends on your applications and what you're going for. And so if you are going for a long-range target shooting cartridge, I would give the nod to the 708 between the two. Though both can be great at it, and actually it might be more common to see a long-range target rifle in 308, I would say the 708 is better suited for the task, just because it's easier and more practical to shoot higher BC bullets with less recoil. And remember, all other things are basically equal. They're the same in every other way. Now, if you watched my video here 4 or 5 months ago about bigger caliber advantage, this would be a great time to talk about that. If you haven't watched it, go back and look at that. Just search for bigger caliber advantage, hopeful ballistics. So to summarize it heavily, if you have the same bullet weight in two different calibers, so let's just say a 150 grain bullet in a 708 and a 150 grain bullet in a 308. The bigger caliber is going to shoot that same bullet faster, all other things being equal. So same case, same powder, same amount of powder, everything being the same, only difference being the caliber of the bullet that weighs the same. The bigger caliber will always shoot it faster. Why? It's simply about contact surfaces. There's more contact surface on the back of a wider bullet, a bigger caliber, for that force behind it to hit on it. And then in the other way, there's more surface area on the side of a smaller caliber bullet that actually has the potential to obtain more friction as it goes down the barrel. So all things being equal, except for the caliber of the bullet, a 308 will always shoot the same weight bullet faster than a 708. But there is a flip side, and the flip side is, in that scenario, the 708 will have a higher BC bullet. So 150 grain 708 is going to have a higher BC than 150 grain 308. So it really just comes down to what you're looking for. If you're strictly hunting, it's really going to be hard to make a case for the 708. And I want to really bad, but it just has a bigger offering. It's more versatile. It's more popular. It's more common. It is a little wider bullet. It's going to make a bigger hole. If it's the same weight bullet, it's going to shoot it a little faster. And then if you're looking for a high BC bullet, you are going to get a high BC with less recoil. To get the same BC in a 308, you're going to have to get a lot more recoil. And so 708 has the advantage there. But at what distance will it actually mean anything? You know, most shots are under 300 yards. In some areas, it's under 100 yards. And the wind drift numbers are not going to be big enough to notice it until you get beyond 300 yards. And yes, there is a difference. It's losing energy and velocity slower because it has a higher BC. But for that to have a significant impact, it's really beyond 300, 400, 500 yards. And so yeah, at 1,000 yards, there's a tremendous benefit to the high BC bullet. Even at 600, there's a significant benefit. But at most hunting distances, there's not. And so the short answer is if you're target shooting, you know, it's going to be much easier to shoot a high BC bullet with less recoil, and it's going to perform better at 1,000 yards. And so you get the edge there. If you're strictly hunting, the edge definitely goes to the 308. Because even if your plan is to shoot a 120, 130 grain bullet in a hunting scenario, you can do that with either. And if you're not thinking about long range, the only difference is the 308 shooting it faster. If you're hunting, it's 308. If you're target shooting, even though it's not as popular as a 308, I would give the edge to the 708. But now there are certain circumstances where the 708 is better. If you're talking just all around, if your goal is to shoot 1,000 yards, a lot, but occasionally hunt with it as well, 708 is probably a better choice. If you plan to shoot a lot of varmints and some big game, 708 is probably a better choice because you can get down to a 100 grain bullet, and I believe you can only get down to a 110 grain bullet on a 30 caliber. So there could be certain scenarios when you're talking about best all around where the 708 could definitely win, especially if you're factoring in target shooting. As bad as I want to tell you that the 708 wins this, it just can't. I have to be honest, it just can't. Unless you're talking about very specific scenarios, which I've done in the past. But in typical hunting scenarios, the 308 is shooting the same bullet faster, and yet it's not as overbore as the 708. It's actually going to have a longer barrel life. And with the same weight bullet, the recoil is the same. That doesn't mean anything. The recoil advantage of the 708 only comes into play with heavier per caliber bullets and when you want a specific BC. So if you're looking for a BC over 600, definitely go with the 708 because you're going to get it at around 160, 170 grain bullet versus, 220 grain bullet in a 308. There are specific scenarios where I could definitely say the 708 could be better all around, but unless you're doing a lot of target shooting as well, I have to give it to the 308. It's just going to be better in almost every way. But I'd like to give you some examples of some reloads that I've done. I've talked about them on the channel quite a few times, but I just think this would be a pretty good time to bring them up. So with Barnes TTSXs, in 708, I have routinely got, without pressure, 3,200 feet per second with a Barnes 120 grain TTSX in a 708. In fact, my brother borrowed my Tikka and this particular bullet and killed a deer with it this year. I'll put pictures on the screen of him and his deer and the bullet. And it performed great. And he got himself a pretty nice buck. If you count all the little kickers, it was a 15-point buck, so pretty cool. So 120 grain bullet going 3,200 feet per second. By the way, that's much faster than most of your reloading manuals. But if you go to Barnes published data, it's not honestly that much faster than what they claim. So I really like Barnes published data because they're pretty close to what I get. Like they're hot rodding it. They're within pressure. They're not going over pressure, but they're not just slow rolling these things. With 308 though, in a 130 grain bullet using tack powder, same bullet by the way, Barnes TTSX, I've got 3,300 feet per second. Now the 120 grain in a 708 and the 130 grain in a 308 is not the exact same BC. It's fairly close. To get an exact comparison, it would be more like a 115 grain bullet in a 708, which I don't believe exists. So it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, but the BC is fairly close. But with a 10 grain heavier bullet, I'm getting 100 feet per second faster with a 308, and that's mainly due to the bigger caliber advantage. And then once again, it's not as overbore either, so I can shoot more of them before the barrel goes out. Not that barrel life is really an issue with either one of these cartridges. Neither one are that overbore. The 308 is not overbore at all. It's got a very long barrel life, and the 708 is not terrible at all. It's more overbore compared to the 308, but it's not overbore at all. It's not like a 7 mag or 7 PRC. You're gonna have it for a long time. But now if you shoot heavier bullets, with a 160 grain class bullet in my 708, I routinely get 2,800 feet per second with Superformance. And then with the 172 grain Spear Impacts in 308, I got 2,850 with CFE 223. And so 172 grain bullet going 2,850, 160 grain bullet going 2,800. That actually is a little bit of an advantage to the 708 because that's a much higher BC bullet. But if you played around with it, I'm sure you could find the right powder to get the 308 even faster. But that kind of gives you an example. If you find the right powder, the 308 and the 708 are amazingly great cartridges that are way better than you think they are. I'm very happy with both cartridges. I love them both. They're both in my top 5 cartridges of all time. I'm excited to do a lot more work with the 708 and the 308, but in particular the 708. The 708 I have currently in the Tikka T3X stainless is one of my favorite rifles. I really, really like it. Good rifle, good cartridge, and I'm excited to continue to play around with it and learn more. But I just have to be as objective as I can, and the 308 just beats it in so many ways. So the final word is 308 wins. It has to. It's just, I can't honestly say that it's better unless you give it specific circumstances. In specific circumstances, I could pick the 708 for being an all-around cartridge better if you're adding in long-range target shooting. But as a hunting cartridge, which is what most people are watching this channel for, 308's just better. But it really comes down to your applications. What do you plan to do with it? How long range are you planning on shooting? And things like that. Is it target shooting? Is it hunting? Those are the things you'll have to ask yourself. And then you can make the decision. But really, you can't go wrong with either one. But if you had to give the edge to one, it's really not even close. It's the 308. So I love the 708, but the 308 is the winner of this. I've enjoyed this, drinking coffee with you, talking to you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. More content like this coming out. Leave a comment below. What's your thoughts on the 708, 308? Do you think I was right? Do you think I was wrong? And until next time, guys, take care.